This is a Step Beyond the Fire podcast. My name is Cully. I'm a land manager and a wildlife biologist here in my home state of Florida. I invite you to join me on a journey as I seek to document the little-known stories told by those who use fire for the benefit of the land, also known as prescribed fire. So come on, let's head into the field and meet the people where the flame ends and new life begins. Support for A Step Beyond the Fire podcast is due in part to the following sponsor.
Hello, this is Scott Crosby, owner of Crosby Forestry and GIS Services, LLC. My mission is to help private landowners with their forest management needs. I specialize in timber sales, reforestation, forest management plans, and exotic plant mapping. Check out my website at crosbyforestry.com to find out how my 33 years of forestry experience in Florida can help serve you and your land management needs. I will look forward to speaking with you about how to turn your land into forest and forest into cash with a stewardship ethic.
Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of A Step Beyond the Fire. I'm really excited for this show tonight because we had a great mutual connection through Steve Miller, who was on the previous episode, and he suggested I reach out to a gentleman named John Weir. John has had an impressive career that's really encompassed a great deal of fire research and education. He's currently an extension specialist for Fire Ecology at Oklahoma State University, where he's been teaching and conducting research for the past 32 years. John has authored more than 50 prescribed fire publications, and his research interests lie in fire effects, training, smoke management, wildfire preparedness, and range management. He currently teaches 3 different prescribed fire courses for Oklahoma State University as well. He's received numerous awards and distinctions, one of which is the fact that he's considered the father of prescribed burn associations. Welcome to the show, John. I'm really happy you're here.
Well, glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me and getting to know you. That's going to be great.
Yeah, I was thinking, I mentioned to a few folks today that I ran into, we had the North Florida, like I was telling you, the North Florida Prescribed Burn, the Prescribed Fire Council meeting today. So we talked about a lot of different interesting things, one of which was kind of some of the topics I want to get into this podcast with you tonight. So he's joining us live from Oklahoma, and yeah, I'm really glad this worked out the way it did. So the first thing I wanted to get into with you is, so a lot of folks that I've talked to that I've really had on this show are basically through my connections with work in the conservation world that is happening here in Florida. And I wanted to ask you if you could maybe shed some light on how fire in your part of the country is used as a land management tool and how that might differ a little bit than kind of what we got going on here.
It's used in multiple different ways. If you want to number it now with current stuff, used to the number one reason most people were using fire in this part of the world was livestock production to help increase weight gains on stocker cattle, remove old forage growth, increase forage quality, things like that, mainly for livestock production. Again, it's still livestock production, still number 2 on the list. Number 1, though, by far, is cedar control. So eastern red cedar is kind of our arch enemy and nemesis out here. Again, it grows pretty well everywhere, but it's taken over a lot of our prairie sites and rangelands and stuff. And so, trees don't belong on rangelands and grasslands. And so fire is the best thing to use to control cedar. Again, fortunately it is a non-sprouter, so don't resprout. So that's a good thing. If we can get it killed with fire, it will, it's out of there. And so that's the number 1 use. Number 2 anymore is kind of tied between livestock production and wildlife, managing for wildlife habitat. That's getting to be a huge use for fire. It's creeped up in the last 10, 15 years, is up in there within doing that. And then the other thing would be mainly is other woody plant suppression, knocking back other woody shrubs, other trees that are invading our grasslands and shrublands and stuff that we have in this part of the world.
The first species that you mentioned, did you say red cedar?
Yeah, eastern red cedar, yes.
Eastern red cedar. So is that more of a species that outcompetes, or do you sort of consider it non-native in the range there?
It's a native species. It grew here in Oklahoma and throughout a lot of the plains, but historically it was limited to areas where fire couldn't get to it. Typically, rocky outcroppings, drainages along rivers, creeks, areas just where fire couldn't get to it. So fire kept it at bay. Then with European man settlement, it was planted a lot. So you had a lot of plantings that went on because it is a pretty quick growing tree. I think some of it was readily available for time and stuff. And then secondly, the suppression of fire as man settled this area and stuff. So that brought the increase on with it. So it's a native invasive. I know some people get all worked up whenever you say natives can't be invasive. Yes, they can. They belong on a site. And when they grow outside of their site, they're invasive. And that's what these are doing. They're growing outside of their areas where they do. And again, what they do is they displace forage production. Again, they can cut forage production by half, again, to getting the high densities of them. They take a lot of water out of the system, mainly by interception of rainfall and stuff, so you can reduce. Some of the studies have showed anywhere from 40 to 60% interception of rainfall. So again, you can lose. So again, as you get further west, where rainfall is more important, you lose, 40 to 60% of a 30-inch rainfall. That's 15 inches gone that don't ever get to the ground and don't recharge any kind of aquifers, any kind of groundwater runoff, or, even other plants and stuff that are there. Then not only that, the issues of human health, the pollen issues going in, also the wildfire. Again, eastern red cedar is a very volatile fuel, especially when it gets dried down, it gets low fuel moisture and stuff, especially in droughty conditions. It gets to be some pretty good wildfires that go on. And so the risk to human life and human and property get pretty great as the increase of cedar goes about. So
that's really interesting to hear because, obviously in Florida, we have a lot of similar species. In some areas of Florida, the growing season is pretty much year round. So there's always a lot of competition going on in the landscape here too. But I'll have to research a little bit more on that. I'm interested to hear, to read a little bit more on that, how those red cedars are impacting the systems out there.
Yep.
So before we get into some of the research that you're involved with, I understand that you grew up in Oklahoma. So as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
What did I want to be? Actually, I first wanted to be a garbage man.
Really?
I've seen some in town, and they got their dried on the back of a truck, hang off the back of the truck. I'd say, as I got older and before I went to college, and actually I wanted to be in extension. I didn't want to. I was real active in 4-H and stuff growing up, and so I kind of wanted to be a 4-H agent. Work with youth and 4-H and stuff. Extension wise, and then I got into college and kind of went that way, but then I got more involved in range management stuff, and then the fire parts of that. I'd always kind of had an interest in fire, other than as being a little arsonist as a kid as well. I like to play with fire a lot, but I kind of understood fire when I was younger and realized that Native Americans had used it a lot, and I saw the encroachment of a lot of woody plants in areas, and I saw the effects of fire. And I thought, that the fire needed to be here, but I just didn't know. I didn't know there was a career in it or anything like that. But I found that and started working with that. So I'm actually kind of in the position in extension still, but I'm a extension specialist. I'm not I don't really work with 4-H or anything like that, but mainly the extension part of stuff and a specialist. So at least kind of stayed part of that from what I started college with.
That well, your title and the type of work that you do is pretty unique, because I haven't heard about anybody in at least associated with the University of Florida that's actually a fire ecology like specialist that does that type of extension work. And I've seen some of the publications you put out about very practical publications, like the prescribed burning handbook for Oklahoma, those kind of things.
I'm a simple person, and I like simple things, and I really do. I that's what my favorite thing to do is work with landowners and work with the public, and so that's what I want to do. And I want to keep it simple so it's easy to understand. And I firmly believe too that fire is simple. We can make it simple. A lot of times people want to make it really hard and mystical. You got to know the secret handshake and all the right buzzwords and all that stuff. And that's as far from the truth as it is. Most people can use fire and use it safely and effectively. A lot of times just have to show them. And again, we got a lot of landowners that are burning and have been burning for long before I was ever around. They've been burning for decades. We've got a fire culture in northeast Oklahoma and in Kansas that's been going on for over a century, with ranchers burning up there and stuff. And so, they understand it and they know how to use it and what they're doing. But that's what I want to do is I want to make it simple so that people can use it and use it safely, use it effectively, and meet goals and objectives. And it's not be scared of it, because, if you look at it, most people are scared of fire because they just don't understand it. And one of the main reasons they don't understand it is, again, they've been told by a cartoon bear that fire is bad. And so that's the worst thing there is that cartoon bear telling people that fire is bad. Secondly, the media portrays all fires as wildfires, and they're all going to be raging infernos and get out of control. And everybody thinks that all fire behaves like a wildfire. And, folks that do prescribed fire realize that no, it doesn't. We pick the days, we can pick the conditions, we can pick that stuff, and we can make it safer and stuff that we can do. And trying to show people that's a big part of it.
Sure. And speaking of talking about, especially private landowners, when it comes to prescribed fire, it sounds like the concerns over fire suppression is an issue for you guys in your part of the country as well, which is a big one for us here. So whenever fire is applied to the landscape, there's this all important question that always seems to come up, kind of on the private land side of things, is like, and even on as a public land steward, how well am I protected legally if things don't really go very well? Along those lines, can you talk about some of the findings from the work that you've done in this type of?
Yeah, you're kind of talking about liability, and liability is different from state to state. Every state has their own liability laws. There's no blanket law. And I would say some states have better laws than other states. Oklahoma law is pretty simple. Again, like I said, we're a simple people, and I like our law because it's real simple. Because again, number one, we don't have to ask permission from anybody to burn. It's a property right, and you can just go. You can go burn. Let's go do that. But there is a few things that have been put in our law that if you do certain things, it will limit a little bit of your liability to actual damages. It reduces punitive damage or anything like that. So it's a good thing, and I really like it. We work really well with it. I know Florida has probably the best prescribed fire law. The act that was enacted in 1990, I believe it was, and it was amended again in 93, I think, to relieve everybody from gross negligence. Had to be proven gross negligence to do that. So it's a great law. It's also been upheld in court a couple of times there in Florida. And so there's a lot of good laws. There's some laws that are a lot more difficult. You go to Nebraska. Nebraska, it has kind of a simple negligence type law, but Nebraska is under a burn ban 365 days a year. And so landowners,
wow, really?
so that's their law and the way it states. And I think that's been on the books since 1800s. And they just have to, but they have to get permission. They get a permit from local fire chief or fire marshal. And in some areas it's easy to get, some areas it's difficult. Trying to get a fire permit from somebody that puts fire out. So that's sometimes a hard thing to do. I want to set a fire, and you're talking to folks that put it out. And so sometimes you have some difficulties within that in some areas. So there's a lot of different fire laws and things that do that. But as for going back for protection of liability, again, most of it, if you look at it, most escape fires that we can talk about an escape. And when I talk about an escape, that's any fire that gets out of the burn unit, no matter what the cause, but you got to call for assistance to, come put it out. It becomes a little, a lot of times people think, oh, it's going to get out and burn the whole county. I hear that a lot. It looks it's going to get out and just burn the whole county down. And we're going to burn, we're going to lose everything we got. Well, I've done a lot of work on that because liability is kind of one of my pet peeves. Because again, it's the number one excuse people use for not to burn. And I use the word excuse because that's what it is. It's an excuse a lot of people use not to burn.
Sure.
Within that. And so that liability issue, because again, if you look at the facts and start documenting, and that's what I've been trying to do for the last, almost 13 years, trying to document, get people to record and report their burns. And we've got a thing online where people can report their burns and stuff. And so we've been getting some good data and information on that and then talking to other people. It's hard to find where there's been any kind of large lawsuit over properly conducted prescribed burns, especially in the private sector. Within looking at that, there's some that are around, but they're very limited. As for the number of burns, and it's just not really there. And so that's one of those things I try to do that to show people that, hey, this, that's not what you need to be worried about, as much. It needs to be there. And there's also some things that can help us out. What's really interesting, in the Southeast, in the southeastern states, y'all have access to some insurance for prescribed burning and stuff. But what's real funny is they won't insure us out here in the Great Plains because they say, it's too dangerous. It's too risky. Which again, our fires do. They move fast. Grass fires definitely move fast. We got some rapid moving, hot moving fires, especially in the dormant season. But I kind of find that amusing to a point that they're worried about not wanting to insure something out here because again, if it gets out, it's burning up a lot of grassland, which isn't worth a whole lot. Whereas in the Southeast, it's going to burn up timber, which is worth a little bit more. But they'll insure that. They'll insure that, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. Within that. But again, most of our landowners throughout the Great Plains their farm and ranch liability policies will cover them from damages from escape fires. And most of them that they have are pretty good. There's several pretty good insurance companies that write general liability just for farm and ranch policies and cover damages from escape fires. So they're kind of covered within that. So that's kind of a, something they can rely on a little bit to do that. And, I know of a few, and again, those little insurance cases, and I talk little, most of them that I've been privy to and even worked on a few of them, they're less than $50,000. Most of them are less than $30,000. I don't have that in my pocket, right now. But that's not a large sum of money. I mean, really, it's not something I can pull out of my pocket and pay you right now. But it's not those $1 million lawsuits that everybody has this vision of, things like that. Most of them are $5,000, $10,000, $10,000 little insurance claims. And, again, where's all this big, scary lawsuits and insurance claims and all that we hear about? very rare.
I did hear one of those big scary lawsuit sort of situations. There was a lessons learned talk that was given today at the council meeting about, I won't name names, but the individual was a private fire contractor and got into a situation where sort of the short of it was that the day of the burn, everything went great. They burned about a little over 400 acres. Things went well. They followed up the next day, did a lot of mop up, a lot of hands-on work. Followed it up the next day, same thing, put in a lot of work, sprayed out a lot of smokers and checked it. Then the third day, they checked it again. And then the fourth day, and you probably heard about this one, a thunderstorm came that was, the winds were forecast to be south for at least a week during this time. And the thunderstorm was 50 to 60 mile an hour downdrafts from the northwest, completely opposite direction, and fire got out, and it made a run towards a small community and burned up a bunch of homes. And there was, through that experience, this contractor, obviously, when you go through something like that, it's the guy, he was already, nobody was even there that day after the burn, because you're basically, there's monitoring going on, but it's not to the extent of a day or two after the burn. So they ended up, when all was said and done, it was so bad that the Morgan and Morgan, the big law firm, set up a tent in the town where this happened. And they gathered up about 75 people or so from this big lawsuit. And the judge ultimately ruled, they ended up, because he had insurance. This individual had prescribed burn insurance, and that was one of those one-offs that the way it ended up, they did a settlement, but the judge ruled that he was not grossly negligent. They had very experienced people there. There was a lot of resources and energy and people that really knew what they were doing were part of this. And yes, there was a settlement, but the insurance covered that, and that was part of the whole process. But this individual does work all around the country and is burning like a lot of acreage every year. So it was his point that he made was that this was kind of a worst case scenario. And despite all that, he picked up and is continuing his business and continuing working with these big state and federal agencies and as a private fire contractor, and getting beyond that experience, because there was, when you go through something like that, I could imagine they were questioning whether he should even continue doing this ever again. But I thought it was a good learning experience to hear about. Man, this was a worst case scenario. Like it was really, really bad. And they came out and their business didn't go under. They were able to move beyond it.
Like I said, it's a worst case scenario. Again, it's the example you gave, again, like you said, showed, as with a lot of those situations, it's not anything we can do as burners. We're at the mercy of the weather.
Yeah.
And so that would be nice if we were be able to protect ourselves from that, because again, it goes back. But I'm glad he was able to get through that. I would like to know how many burns the guy has done in his career, and then he's got that one.
Yeah. I think it was over 450, I think, and I want to say, yeah.
And that's the deal. Like you said, it's a once in a lifetime experience deal. I'm actually working on a deal of one in Texas that is very similar. And the burn contractor did everything right. He got a faulty forecast from the National Weather Service.
Oh, wow.
And he actually got a letter from the National Weather Service saying, "Hey, we're sorry that we didn't forecast this, but we didn't realize that front was going to go down that far and all this stuff." And and it's like, so when do we start when are other people accountable? Because again, we do all of our actions. We dotted all of our I's, crossed all of our T's, but we have to rely on somebody else. And then when that somebody else goofs up, it's like, oh, I'm sorry. We'll hopefully learn from this situation, but you go ahead and pay for
it. Right.
That's a sad deal. That's a bad deal. It's just like that. He was not expecting a thunderstorm to form with, huge downburst that's going to start blowing everything out of proportion, that kind of stuff. On that, and that's, going back to law and liability stuff, that's the deal. I think people always ask, what kind of laws do we need for prescribed burning and what could we have? And I actually think that probably one of the best laws that we could ever pass for prescribed burning is a contributory negligence law, where that way, so what a contributory negligence states, is that the person that has damage, they also helped cause their own damage. So I may have started the fire and it burned to your house, and your house may have burned. But the reason your house burned was, it was my fire, but it was also because you had stacked up junk or you had cedar trees growing next to the eaves of your house. So you contributed to your own demise. And so that's a contributory negligence. So you have to take responsibility for your own actions, even though I may have been the one that started the fire, you still contributed to your own demise. But the problem is we won't see a lot of those laws. They're hard to get passed because we know the legislatures are full of lawyers that make money off of tort claims. So get them to pass stuff that, that they're making money off of.
I heard the statistic today from the Forest Service, the Florida Forest Service, rather, that the percentage of prescribed burns that actually escape is 0.16% of a percent.
Yeah. From the stuff that I have, data that I have it at about, so this is an escaped fire and this is not any fire. And most all of these fires that I've reported and that I've got data on, there's been no lawsuits or even insurance claims on that. And it's like 1.5%.
Yeah.
So, if you go and so I also talk about spot fires, and an escape fire was a fire that left the burn unit no matter what the cause, but you had to call for assistance to help put it out.
Right.
A spot fire, I call that any fire that leaves a burn unit no matter what the cause, but you put it out with the equipment and people on site.
Sure.
And so if you look at that data, it's about 18 to 22%. So 1 out of 5, every 20%. So 1 out of 5 burns you do, you're going to have a spot, right? It's kind of like riding a bicycle, riding a horse. If you're not falling off every now and then, you're not riding a whole lot. You're going to have spots, but you that's where your experience and stuff comes in. You kind of know when you're going to have those spots. You kind of know where they're going to happen. You place people and equipment in those positions, and it happens, and then you run over there and you put it out real quick. And they typically, most of them too get, they're less than 1/10 of an acre in size. The biggest majority of them that get reported, like less than 1/10 of an acre in size. And I would say most of them, I bet, aren't no bigger than a dinner table. Most of them.
I was, I had one a while back. My boss at the time, I called over the radio and said, "Hey man, there's a spot over. I'm spraying it out," and it was not much bigger than maybe 3 or 4 dinner tables, but I'm spraying it. And then he comes over there. He said, "That wasn't a spot over. That was a creep across." It crept across the line.
Creeped across. That's right.
Yeah. So
that stuff's going to happen, but that's why we have equipment. That's why we have people to help monitor and to look at it, and that's where again our experience comes in. And we just got to do that. So again, most of the escapes that I have documented, reported, most of them are, I think 67% of them that I have out of, I think I've got like over 7,000 burns that people have reported stuff to me about are like almost 70% of them are less than 10 acres in size. That's an escape,
Yeah.
And nobody's reported one over 1,000 acres. A couple over 100, between 100 and 1,000 acres. Don't know the exact size, but they're still not that big. But like I said, the majority of them, 70% are 10 acres or less on the escape. Again, 80-something% of all the spots are less than a tenth of an acre in size. Actually, I think an acre, less than an acre, I think 87% of them, if I remember my data correctly, from that stuff. And so, it's most of it happens, but we're there. We can put it out and take care of it. And usually a lot of it that you hear, some of the more bad tales about are things like the story you just talked about with the contractor. It was a day or two later after the burn, and some freak windstorm comes through that does that. I've conducted. I'm almost to 1,450 burns in my career that I've burned.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I've had 3 escapes that I've called fire departments to come assist, and one of them we already had it out before the fire department even got there. Within that, other 2, but again, both of those, I think 120 acres was one of them, and the other one was like 80-something acres. Again, no insurance claims, no lawsuits, anything like that. But that kind of stuff is going to happen. But we just got to do that. But if you look at my data, that's like less than, 0.1% of all the burns that I do. So again, what you can always say is, man, I'm 99.9% successful.
Oh yeah. It's very, and that's not stretching the truth a bit.
No. And that's what we need to get more out, because that is the sad thing. It's just like that contractor you talked about and other people. You can do thousands of burns successfully. The only burn that anybody's going to remember is the one that got away.
Well, and it didn't help in his situation because the commissioner of agriculture showed up, and immediately he didn't even hear from anybody. He just heard it on the news that they were pointing the finger at the private contractor. And so it just the way the whole thing unfolded was, it wasn't good.
Yeah, that's too bad. Because again, and I think that's what we've done. I think we need to do a better job throughout the whole country. All of us burners, we need to work on creating a good database, either statewide or a national database where we can record, burns and stuff, so we can get that information out there to show not only people that we're trying to convince that they need to burn, that, hey, it's safer than you think it is, but also to show, legislators, to show administrators, to show insurance companies and stuff, to say, hey, here's our records. We're not this, just because we say we're going out and setting fires, it doesn't mean that they're all going to get away and do all that. Because again, you get the controlled burn culture that always gives us a bad name. And to me, controlled burns, that's people burning junk and piles and debris.
Uh-huh.
And that's just junk burners. And they're the ones that give fire, really give fire a bad name because they always get out. And then people say, oh, yeah, I was in people over setting that fire. Yeah. And it's like, okay, really? That's did you really see what it was? It was a guy, or somebody that was over there, and they lit a pile on fire, and they had a case of beer, and they sat there and drank half of it, and then went home and watched the football game and could care less what was going on, and the fire got it.
Yeah. Or they try to take advantage.
Prescribed burn. No, that is not a prescribed burn. That's somebody burning junk.
Yeah, my friend was running a burn one time, and she said that some adjacent landowners pulled an old couch out in the middle of their yard, and they lit it on fire while they said, well, you guys are burning, so I'm going to burn this old couch. So,
that's the funny thing is fire is so contagious. went around here in the spring. There's a lot of fire going on here in Oklahoma, and it's funny. On a good day, you'll see a smoke cloud go up, and the next thing you know, see another one, and you'll see another one. And they'll just be, before you know it, you can look 360 degrees, and there'll be 15 fires going on. It's just contagious. People burning and doing that, and our neighbors even, trying to get together.
Maybe one of these days, I said this before, I'd love to come out there and see what you guys are all about one day. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, come on out. We'd love to have you out here to help us burn. We have a good time. So.
Yeah, I would love that. So before we sign off, I had one quick thing, which I mentioned early at the beginning of the show. It's about prescribed burn associations. So it's really hard to talk about burning on private lands without mentioning these prescribed burn associations. We had an episode in the past with a gentleman named Ben Williams, who helped found the North Florida Prescribed Burn Association here. So we've talked about it a little bit on the show. And for those who may not be as familiar, would you mind sort of covering the basics of what a PBA is and the story of how they became so successful with your guidance?
So what the idea is it's a neighbor helping neighbor based situation. It's kind of the way things used to be. It's kind of like an old fashioned barn raising or branding where, neighbors get together, go help each other out and do that. But we're using fire. And so that's really what a PBA is part of it is to get neighbors talking to each other, pool their labor, pool their equipment. It also helps reduce that risk because you start joining neighbors. So then you don't have that property boundary to worry about. We're going to burn an area that may have 3 different or 4 different neighbors, properties. Mm-hmm. So again, that helps reduce that risk. And then also we may be burning because we're going to burn from one road to another road because that way we got good fire breaks from roads that we're using, or we're going to use a creek over here or something over here. And that way I don't have to try to put fire breaks on my property and contain it here. We're going to burn this whole area because I don't know how many times I've worked with landowners or even been burning before. And the neighbor comes up and goes, "Man, I wish I knew you were burning. I'd have burnt this place too." It's kind of, like I said, fire gets to be contagious within that. And so that's what a PBA is really about. It's where a group of concerned citizens within a community, an area, get together to pool resources, pool labor, and to help each other burn. It's what it's about on doing that. I helped start the first burn association back in 1997. It really stemmed from an article I'd read in Beef Magazine there in the mid-90s about range improvement associations in California that were real active back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And they had used fire and stuff within that, but they were range improvement associations. And I had some people around the research station there that I ran at the time there west of campus, west of Stillwater, Oklahoma. And so we formed one. It didn't get to take off like I'd hoped it had, but I sent all the information to a friend of ours in Texas, and he formed one there in Texas in 1998, and it became really big, strong, and started going. And then we got more going here in Oklahoma. And then again, Nebraska, Kansas, kind of more of the Great Plains, Southern Great Plains took off with it for a while. And then, again, I got invited. I spoke at the North Florida Prescribed Fire Council. I spoke at the South Carolina Fire Council, the Georgia Fire Council, the North Carolina Fire Council. I've talked a lot all over the U.S. and stuff about PBAs, and they're finally getting going. And currently, right now, the best we've got, the last total we have 119 PBAs in 16 states. I believe it is, maybe 19.
Yeah, that's incredible. And there's a lot of great...
they have grown exponentially here in the last probably 5 years, with California leading the way. California has they have over 16 PBAs now. I think they're actually over 20. They're actually going to start catching up with us here in Oklahoma, and I can't let that happen. So we've got about 24 PBAs here in Oklahoma, and they've been real active, do a lot of good stuff. Like I said, y'all got in Florida now. There's now Southern Alabama, Southwest Georgia's got one. There's some great, real active PBAs in North Carolina that are doing really good. Missouri, South Dakota, Arkansas is really growing. I think they have over. I was actually in Arkansas a couple of weeks ago speaking to them. They've got about 6, and I think fixing to form another 1 or 2. Louisiana's doing some. Oregon's got some. So it's really spreading out, getting active, and that's what a PBA is to help that. There's certain areas that a PBA probably won't ever work if there's already some kind of fire culture that's already there, and they already know what they're doing. That's fine. What it's really designed to do is to help those areas. A lot of times, it doesn't matter how big a landowner you are, if you're big or small. It does seem to definitely benefit some of the smaller landowners because they're the ones with limited resources, limited equipment, limited labor on some of that stuff. But it's not designed just for that. It can fit anywhere. It can be a model that fits anywhere to do that. And that's the good thing about it. And also the other thing is the way we've done, we try to just make it work for the people in that community, in that area. So, we've got some PBAs that are very formal. They have written bylaws and all kinds of stuff that they follow and guidelines and different things, and that's great. And then we got others that don't have any of that written stuff down. They just kind of go on a handshake and a word, and that's how they operate. And if you probably tried to formalize those groups, they would probably disband because they just didn't want to be a part of something like that. And so they can work, any way that they can. But the biggest thing is that it gets a group of people together to promote and use prescribed fire, and then they become the voices in that community for that fire. And doing that, so again, they start to work with the local fire departments and other people and start promoting fire and hopefully getting more fire on the ground and increasing their membership. Again, we've had some PBAs that you covered certain areas, but they've got enough members and equipment that they've split up. And it's not because they were mad at each other. It's just because, hey, we've got so many equipment and stuff. We need to be burning 2 or 3 burns on the same day. And, you live on the other side of the county and we live over here on this side of the county. We're going to stay over here and y'all burn over there. And it's great to see that kind of stuff work and go.
Yeah, I really, it's really neat seeing the types of works that the North Florida PBA locally here in my area are doing, and they've got a great program that emphasizes education for their members. They do a scholarship to try to get at least one person sent to the Certified Prescribed Burn Manager training courses. They're big on outreach, and they also have a unique method where they have a sweat equity requirement. So that sort of cuts down on the people who really aren't serious about it. Some folks are looking just for a contractor to come in and burn their land. But if what they have to do is they have to follow, you got to be on 2 burns and help somebody else out on 2 burns first. And then, okay, we'll come and work with you. And that seems to work really well for them in that regard because it's, having that sweat equity in there helps a lot.
Have that same kind of stuff, and we put a lot of that in some of those guidelines early on, and a lot of that, you really didn't have to have that because people were willing to really help and do that, be a part of it. Once they figured out that hey, we need fire. And doing that, it's great to hear good stories about them and how successful they are. There's been some PBAs, like I've had some members come up to me and tell me stories about, said, oh yeah, we had a neighbor over here that he told me, he said, I'm going to sue you if you burn your place. It's like, okay, really, how can you sue me if I burn my place? I do what I want with it. and all that. They're all scared of fire and all that.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, you're burning their place because they see the benefit of it. They see how things are going, and it's like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I need to be a part of this deal. And, now they're out there burning with them and things like that. Also going to PBA, helping them burn and stuff, and seeing kids out there helping burn.
Yeah.
Because again, you're promoting that fire culture. Getting that built back up that used to be here. There used to be fire cultures throughout the land, and they're gone. And so, but we need to get those back. And also the other thing is, seeing a lot of the older folks and stuff doing. There's something. There's a task out there for everybody. One of the PBAs up here that I work a lot with here in Oklahoma, they've got an older couple that I think they're in their 80s, and they're pretty much at every fire. They bring their side by side, and what they do is they run drinking water and torch fuel up and down the line, and they're another set of eyes. Not that they're going to be able to get out and fight a spot fire, but they can get on the radio and say, "Hey, we got one right here. Come put it out." And man, that's great. They bring drinking water, and a lot of times people go, "Oh, you can't have kids out there. You can't have this." Yeah, you can. You can safely do all that stuff. And again, it's training them up, that future generation, to be able to use fire safely and effectively. That's the big thing.
I like it. So, in closing here, you've given us a lot of great things to think about, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk with folks maybe a little bit about where people can go to find out more about you and some of the work that you are doing these days.
So, like I said earlier, I work at Oklahoma State University. I'm in the Natural Resource Ecology and Management Department in the College of Ag and Natural Resources. If you'll go to do it, the best thing to do is Google search for OK State, just OK, STATE extension. And that'll take you to our Oklahoma State Extension website. You can put a search in there for fact sheets and type in prescribed fire or fire, and it'll bring up a host of fact sheets of stuff that we've authored and co-authored and helped out with information with that. Also, we have a great social media person in our department. She does a fantastic job of promoting natural resource, and she does a lot of fire stuff because we do a lot of fire in Oklahoma State and doing that. So we have a Facebook page. If you look up Oklahoma State University Natural Resources Extension on Facebook, also they're on Twitter and Instagram, and we put out she does a lot of posts on fire and stuff. There's a lot of good information that gets out, and there's a lot of links in that too that'll take you to research papers or take you to fact sheets and other information and stuff like that. So
far out. That all sounds great. Well, listen, we really appreciate your time, and we are just had a great. Yeah, you've given us a lot of good things to think about. And we appreciate you taking us in another step beyond the fire.
Thank you.